So got it in the shop, made a big bang at the finish line. Not 100% sure why. It started just fine after I shut down, grabbed the chutes. It started up just fine, ran just fine. Drove back to the trailer, looked over it a little bit, but figured it'd be best to get it back here to the shop and do a full diagnosis of it. But started fine out of the trailer and ran fine in the shop. So I'm not sure. I'm kind of perplexed on what that was, but gonna pull the plugs out of it, probably run through the overhead, check everything out real good, and look over all the piping and stuff, and then stare at data until I can figure it out. Hopefully, nothing major, everything seems good. I have a theory in my head, but not yet. Okay, got the front end off. First step here is gonna be pull the plugs out, make sure they look all good. Because they're the only thing that was actually in there when it went bang. Maybe they can report to us what they saw. Usually when you have one that bangs out the exhaust without sneezing out the intake or the burst panel, then it usually went really fat or something like that. So maybe we'll see something in this. It was definitely really, really fat, but we kind of knew that already. Hopefully, the goal here is not to find any burnt straps, nothing stupid, nothing smashed, where something come apart. So far, they all just look really, really fat. Normally, I don't run my stuff that fat, but I'm normally not at some weird, boost level. Like, I'm usually either at, 15 pounds on the street or 50 pounds, 60 pounds at the track. But with these tires, I'm taking it, easy and slow. So we're at like 25 or 30 pounds of boost. So all really, really fat. Really, really fat. Goodness gracious. Okay. Hey, everything looks good there. Let's go to the other side. Okay, so nothing too bad there. Got one that's a little loose, but I'll let the motor cool down and go through and set them all. But I mean, you're really looking for one that's either really, really tight or really, really loose, or one that's tight or too tight or whatever. But all those look good. All the plugs look good. I don't know. Gonna keep going. Welcome to my race car. Huh? Kind of dirty. Need some house cleaning going on in here, but this is the only way I could think of to illustrate to you what I feel like happened when the big pop came out of the exhaust. So I'm going to run through it, show you what I think, and then you let me know in the comments what you think happened and if I'm full of crap or not. So looking at the data here, as you can see, this was from the first run, no boom. At the end of the run here, after this white line is basically the finish line. After the finish line, I let off the gas, the RPM comes down, drive shaft comes down, boost, drops. And then, as you can see, the lines go away. When those lines go away, that's me shutting off the ignition. So that's what happens. That shuts the ECU off, shuts the engine off, begins the shutdown procedures. That way the engine isn't running when I'm in the shutdown and all the oil is sloshed to the front of the oil pan. The engine isn't in decel trying to slow the car down with not enough RPM and no oil in the back of the oil pan. So go through the stripe, throw the chute, wait on the chute to hit, ignition off. That's what I do. And that's what I did on this run here. But if you look at this run here, this is my second run from the racetrack that did go boom. If you look out here, so this is the finish line by time for 88.7 at 155.9. So that's the finish line. Chute will hit about there, and then, or maybe just a little after, whatever, and then ignition off. But first you let off. I usually let off and then ignition off. I like to drive into the chutes to keep the catch can from filling up because Pontiacs don't have any good oil drain back. So if you let off before the chute hits, it just basically takes all the oil in the top of the motor and puts it in the catch can. So I like to drive into the chutes, which is what I did here, as you can see. But for whatever reason, the end of this run, they don't drop. Let me turn boost on just like the last one. Turn G-meter off. They don't drop. So boost just disappears, drive shaft disappears, RPM disappears. And they disappear at 499 499.6 basically. They're gone. So that's a little quick on a 488 run to have shut the ignition off. You know, that's a little, if you're waiting on the chute to hit and you go through the stripe, chute hits, you let off the throttle, and then you throw the ignition off, that's a little quick. I believe what happened was I threw the chute, and it takes more distance than the big tire stuff. I haven't been to the racetrack on a small tire. I think it takes more distance than the big tire stuff from the finish line, from the chute hitting. So I was probably a little late or a little early, whatever, on the chute. And then instead of waiting for the chute to hit and then letting off the gas with my foot and then throwing the ignition, I think what I did was threw the chute, went straight to ignition while my foot was still floored. And this kind of proves it, because if you look at TPS, that's this orange line at the very top. See if I can make it a whatever, purple. Okay, so that's this purple line. So if you back the data log up, you will see TPS is sitting over here doing nothing, and then it goes to the floor at 100%, and then it's at 100% for the whole run. And then when the data logger shuts off, the last thing that the ECU saw before it shut off was 100% throttle. The last thing the data logger saw for the ignition was shut off was 100% throttle. That tells me that my foot was still on the floor when I shut the ignition off, which also tells me that I probably wasn't even at the finish line. I definitely didn't drive into the chute, and we watched the video, zoomed in, slowed it down best we can, and you can see the chute, the laundry drop out of the back of the car, and then almost, I mean, before it even blooms, before, like, when it's still coming out to fall, to bloom, it goes bang, bang, bang out both sides of the motor. That is why I think that I went from the parachute, I threw the parachute, went straight to the ignition and shut it off. And that is why the tuner can't trust the driver, even when the tuner is the driver or the driver is the tuner. You just go by the data log because the driver's full of shit. If you were my tuner and you said, hey, is it possible that you threw the ignition off while you were still at full throttle? I would have said, no, been driving race cars my whole life. Do it for a living. But yet, the data log says different. So that's what I think happened. So what I think happened was I'm at full throttle. I throw the chute. I kill the ignition at full throttle. So this thing's rocking down through there, wide open throttle. Injectors are open, really, judging by the data log, pumping more fuel in it than they should have, which is my fault. But injectors are wide open. This thing's hot and pissed off in the exhaust because it just made a, 4.8 second run, which is longer than normal for this deal. But if you figure injectors are open, everything's hot, exhaust is pissed off. Plus, I'm not running a whole lot of timing in it because of the small tires, so exhaust is probably hotter than normal. When you reach up and kill the ignition, and that injector's wide open, when I kill the ignition, I'm shutting the ECU, I'm shutting the spark box off, but the motor was still turning over, which means the fuel pump was still pumping. The injectors being wide open, they didn't stop the instant I hit this button. It takes milliseconds or whatever it is for them to shut off. So when I hit this button, that was just enough time for the injector and the fuel pump to pump, extra fuel into the motor, and then hit that hot exhaust and, boom town. That's what I think happened. Tell me what you think happened, because I've ran through the whole motor, checked the overhead, looked at the spark plugs, fired it up. It runs great. All the data looks great on the pass before that happened. And you can't see anything in the data that shows the pop. You can't see EGT change. You can't see O2 sensor, fluctuate. You can't see pan back doesn't move. Basically, the data log doesn't show it because the data logger wasn't on when it popped. The only way for the data logger to be off is if I shut that ignition switch off. And I think that's what I did. I think it was just one of those things where my timing was off. I'm used to the big tires at the racetrack or whatever, where, when I throw this chute, it's going 190 mile an hour, whatever it is. When I throw this chute, as soon as the chute handle gets open, the chutes are popping and I'm going to the finish line and I'm shutting the ignition off. And I just think I had a muscle memory weird situation where I threw the chute, reached over, hit the ignition. That's what I think. So we'll find out, because we're going to take it back out and do it again, see what happens. Let me know. Is it fixed? Is it broken? Was it broken? What do you think?